Midsommar is the latest film from Ari Aster. It came out earlier in the year. I'm getting to it quite late. I've been inactive on this channel for a while. I'm just trying to see more films. Unfortunately, I don't always get the time. I'm going to try and get more content out though for all you three people. Okay, right. Two people that watch this channel. We've got the Joker coming up. We've got the Ari Aster film that came out recently. There's also It too. There's a few films I got to see, man. I'm gonna get catching up. So I'll hopefully get around to at least a few of those soon and get a review out for them. And Midsommar is a sort of horror film from Ari Aster. You should remember Hereditary only came out a year ago. He got this film out really quickly, considering that was a huge film for him last year, and now we already have another film. One thing that Hereditary did excellently, I think, was just building suspense. I don't think many horror films in the modern era that I can recall really have built up that type of suspense the whole way through. So many long scenes of just like the camera following characters and things like that just completely just set you in this awful state that I couldn't quite explain. And for those of you who have already seen Midsommar, you will be able to recognize that they're not the same films whatsoever. He really hasn't kept the same formula or the same format. This is versatility in directing, basically. This is nothing like what we've seen from the film that only came out a year ago. I find it really impressive. However, I think Midsommar is a lot worse than Hereditary, not for the reasons that I've mentioned that Hereditary did good, it was a good horror film, this is different though, but I still just feel like this didn't quite pay off for me. With Hereditary, there was a good amount of events that occurred where you didn't really see them coming, or you weren't quite sure of where the film was going to take you, but no matter where it took you, you were generally satisfied. I was generally satisfied. And I think generally speaking to people about the film, they were pretty satisfied with how things ended up being. But with Midsommar though, not really the same for me. I feel like this film didn't have that at all. Like, I didn't know where things were going, but it didn't build up the same amount of suspense. If anything, it took it to the max with how it tried to drag things out. Like the long scenes I mentioned in Hereditary, that was similar in this film, but like it really crossed the line of intrigue for me. And by that I mean to the point where the intrigue just fell apart and I just lost interest. There was just far too much nothingness going on in this film for me. Attempting to explain the plot is kind of pointless because I feel like this is one of those films that's certainly, being left up for interpretation, similarly to the film Us. What didn't work with Us for me was that the suspense was never really working because the horror was just really poor. Like, I just found the horror elements so poor in that film that I never felt like I was sucked into the world that Jordan Peele had created. Whereas in this film, Ari Aster just didn't really develop any sort of suspense to begin with. So at the start of the film, there are definitely some really interesting scenes. I mean, you see this relationship essentially on its way out. I mean, it's pretty obvious from the get-go that these two are working together, but they're not really in the same frame of mind. The Christian is essentially like the therapist in the relationship, which is what we see from Danny's perspective, who has just gone through something so traumatic that she feels like she needs to rely on him during this time, and yet he's really not very good. He's just not really with it. His mind isn't properly in the game. He tells her that, he's going to move away, but he doesn't properly tell her that he's going to move away, and it's just all a bit of a confusion. The relationship's just not working from the get-go. And so once they move away, they get caught up in this cult. There's some really weird things that start off at the beginning that kind of make you feel like you're going to really start seeing some messed up stuff, especially the point of the film where the old people jump off the cliff and kill themselves because it's part of their lifestyle, and that was genuinely horrifying. Like, that was a horrifying moment where I was just, oh my god, do I have to see any more of this? And that was kind of the point of the film. I was like, okay, we're kicking in now. This was about an hour in, by the way. But even still, I was like, no, we're kicking in now. This is where we're gonna start seeing things unfold, seeing things get really, really weird. And you could argue that it did start to get really odd and strange with the friends going missing. But, like, I don't know, I just didn't really feel immersed within the universe that had been set up here. The film just was constantly keeping you waiting. That was really the film. Like, it was just a waiting game to see where things were going to go, and no payoff at the end because the ending really wasn't that good. You see Danny become the queen, you see Christian in a bizarre sex scene, which was hilarious, to be honest. I found that so funny. I think you're meant to find it funny, to be honest, because I don't think that would be placed in the way it was in a non-comedic way. But if it was non-comedic, then I'm just going to say I found it funny. And the thing is that all the interesting things that set up their relationship at the beginning kind of started to fizzle out as well. I mean, you see that he forgets her birthday. You see that he's a bit ignorant when she says things. Like, she'll say something really important and he kind of just shrugs it off and carries on talking to someone else. Things like that. But I'm sorry, but that's not enough development of their relationship. Most of the film really wasn't focusing on that. It was just every now and then they throw little bits in. But, like, their relationship was just not developed strong enough from the get-go for it to be bought into for me. And that's a huge, huge shame because they performed so damn well. Like, Florence Pugh killed their performance. They were brilliant as their roles. They did exactly what they needed to do. She performed, like, the really, really intense anxiety attack scenes really quite well. There were some really cool scenes where there were, like, some psychedelic trips after they'd taken some mushrooms and shit. And they were really directed incredibly well, too. Which is funny because I feel like that was just the entire film, just one psychedelic trip of just weird scenarios that you just didn't really fully understand. But it wasn't like they were too weird to the point where it made the film better. It just kind of was like, no, alright, yeah, okay. I think a film that did that incredibly well very recently was Climax. Like, that was just an intense and absolutely anxiety-ridden film that just got me completely messed up watching it. And there were so many moments that were just so disturbing and weird, just so bloody weird, for a lack for a better word. They were just weird. And this film couldn't even really get that right, I don't think, even though it attempted to aim for that. But aside from the plot, and I think the writing, that definitely dragged this completely down for me, I will say that the directing was incredibly strong. I've just mentioned a second ago about the directing, but there were some really well directed scenes, and the cinematography as well was stellar in this film. The colours were so bright. I actually really love the idea of a horror film, or, well, a quote-unquote horror film, taking place all in the daytime, because it's not really something that you see often, and I think that attempting to go for that was really impressive, and they made use of it as well. Like, they made use of the scenery. There were so many beautiful shots, and I think if they hadn't made use of it, then it would have just been like, well, why did you do this in the daytime? But it wasn't ever like that, and there were some really well shot scenes as well. Like, I love the transition when she gets into the bathroom and then she ends up being on the plane bathroom. That was really cool. And also on the plane where the camera goes out into the open and then you hear, like, the plane engine just roaring. That was really clever. Like, from a filmmaking perspective, like, this would be ridiculously high on my rating scale. Like, I would probably just land this at like an 8 or a 9 just based on that. But you can't just rate a film based on how beautiful it looks, because that's just not what a film is. And unfortunately, so much of this film was just really uninteresting to me. I didn't quite get gripped with everything that was going on. You could definitely shorten this as well. I know it's a bit of a weak complaint to make, a film's too long, but this was quite too long, to be honest. It really could have been like half an hour shorter. And yeah, just a huge disappointment overall. I thought Hereditary was great, but I can't say that about this. I'm going to go 5 out of 10. Really mediocre. Definitely not that strong for me, but I sort of see why people like it. But then again, I just don't know. I think we could have another situation where in like a year's time, people look back at it and think maybe it wasn't that good, but we'll see. But just wasn't really that strong for me. But definitely let me know why you love this in the comments. I want to hear more about this film, because if I've missed something, then I'll definitely think about that if I were to rewatch the film in the future, because I feel like there were some things thrown in that Ari Aster was trying to get you to think about, and maybe it is one of those films that can't be really viewed once. So let me know. Thank you for watching my review. Hopefully you enjoyed what I had to say. Have a good day. More videos coming soon, I promise. I stand by my word. There will be. Have a good day. Goodbye.